What if your greatest gift is quietly killing you? You've always been told your sensitivity was something special, that your heart was beautiful, that your ability to feel so deeply, so fully was rare. But no one talks about the shadow of that gift. No one warns you that feeling everything can leave you with nothing, because when someone cries, you don't just listen, you ache. When someone is afraid, your breath tightens too. When they finally say, "Thanks for being there," and walk away lighter, they don't see that you're now carrying what they left behind. You walk away heavier every time. They call it empathy, but it feels more like erosion. And what's worse, somewhere along the line, you started calling it love. You started believing that to be a good person meant to absorb what others couldn't carry. That care meant self-forgetting. That silence meant strength. And now you walk through life holding stories that aren't yours, pain that was never meant to stay, memories that don't belong to you but live in your body like they do. You can't explain it, not really. How just being near someone angry can make your chest clench, how you'll leave a room full of smiles and still cry on the way home. How someone's energy lingers in your skin, your sleep, your breath. How you take a deep breath and it tastes like someone else's grief. You're the one who can't watch the news without feeling hollow for days. The one who hears a friend vent for 5 minutes and thinks about it for 5 weeks. The one who always knows when something's wrong, even when they swear they're fine. But you don't say anything. You nod, you hold, you don't make it about you. And that's how the cage is built, not with malice, but with misunderstanding. Because you never said you wanted to carry it, you just didn't know how to stop. You thought being available made you valuable. You thought absorbing made you strong. You thought being everything for everyone would finally make someone notice the quiet ache inside you. But no one ever does, because you don't bleed on the outside. And somewhere in the silence, you start to disappear. Carl Jung once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." But if you've spent your life filtering everyone else's shadows, where is your own? You were never taught to hold it. You were taught to hold theirs. So now you float through rooms, tuned in but tuned out of yourself. You take in pain, tension, chaos, and hold it like you were designed for it, but you weren't. You were designed to feel, not to carry. You were designed to witness, not to dissolve. You were not meant to become a container for what others cannot bear. You were meant to become something else entirely. A soul, a flame, and flames do not carry, they transform. You weren't born to be a sponge. You weren't made to be a landfill of invisible sorrows. You were born to burn clean, to stay intact, to give warmth without giving yourself away. This is the beginning of your remembering, that your empathy is not weakness, that your feelings are not burdens, that your soul, your sacred self has been whispering all along, "This is not yours, let it go, let it pass, let yourself return." There's an ancient story one most have never heard, but every empath knows it by heart. Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, vowed to take on the suffering of all beings. He listened to every cry, held every sorrow, opened himself to every form of pain. And one day his body shattered, his head split into fragments, his arms fell apart, his soul could no longer hold what he had taken in. But instead of ending his journey, the divine intervened. He was reborn with 1,000 arms, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 ways to see and respond, no longer broken, now multiplied. Not because he carried more, but because he learned to see differently. You don't have to believe in myth to know that story is true, because you've lived it. You've been the one who says, "I'll carry it again and again until your body starts to whisper what your mouth never dared to speak." You've been the one people depend on. The one who just gets it, the one who walks into a room and feels the tension before anyone speaks. And no one ever asks how heavy it is to be you. Because you don't show it, because you still show up, because no one sees you tremble, but you do. You do when you lie awake, wondering why you can't stop thinking about someone else's grief. You do when your chest tightens from another person's rage. You do when you cry after listening, even though no one said anything cruel. This is what happens when empathy becomes absorption. When you don't just understand, you inhabit. When you don't just witness, you become. It's not compassion, it's collapse. And no one tells you until it's too late. Elaine Aron describes the sensitive nervous system as one that remembers what others forget. Judith Orloff calls it emotional contagion, the silent infection of other people's feelings, thoughts, energy. And no one teaches you how to release what isn't yours, so you carry. You carry with a smile, you carry through the shaking hands, through the locked jaw, through the tearless cries at night when your body knows it can't hold anymore, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. You carry until you can't, until the breakdown, until the silence, until you realize that something has to give, and that something is no longer going to be you. Daniel used to journal after work. He thought it was just venting, but over time, he noticed something. The days when he listened to 3 back-to-back friends break down were the days his own voice disappeared. He'd reread the entries, and they weren't his words. They were echoes, transcripts of others' sorrow written in his handwriting. He stopped writing for a month, and when he came back, he started each page with a ritual. This is mine. That was theirs, and slowly his voice returned. It wasn't louder, it was clearer. You need that clarity too, because no one can carry everything and stay whole. Empathy without boundaries is not a gift. It's a leak, a slow self-erasure disguised as care. You are not a channel for endless pain. You are a soul that deserves to know where you end and the world begins. And here's the paradox. You thought that saying yes to everyone was how you'd be loved, but real love, real connection, doesn't require your self-destruction. You thought absorbing pain made you strong, but real strength is knowing when to feel and when to let go. You thought being available meant being worthy, but you were always worthy, even when you said no, even when you closed the door, even when you chose to feel your own heart first. This is not selfish, this is sacred, this is where the burden stops. Not because the pain is gone, but because you've finally decided not everything belongs inside me. You thought empathy was about becoming what others needed. You thought reading the room made you safe, that mirroring emotions made you kind, that knowing what someone felt before they said a word made you good, and maybe it did. But goodness, when twisted into obligation, becomes erasure. You didn't notice it at first. How you began to shapeshift to survive, how your voice got quieter around louder ones, how your preferences disappeared in favor of peace, how being easy to be around slowly turned into being invisible. You became the one who adjusted, adapted, translated, but now the cost is catching up to you because mirrors reflect, but they do not retain. And you have spent so long reflecting the sorrow, the fear, the joy, the pain of others, that when they leave, there's nothing left behind, just stillness, just fatigue, just questions. Who am I when no one is here? What do I feel when no one is hurting? What do I want when I'm not absorbing someone else's need? This is the quiet crisis of the empath. You didn't disappear all at once. You disappeared in service, in listening, in nodding, in softening your truth to hold space for theirs. And no one noticed because you never made a sound. Pixie Lighthorse once wrote, "What if it is unethical to feel someone's feelings for them? Not oversensitive, not codependent, unethical, because by taking on someone else's pain, you might be interfering with the very thing their soul came here to carry. You might be robbing them of the transformation they were meant to earn. And in doing so, you rob yourself of presence. Empathy isn't meant to be fusion. It isn't meant to swallow you whole," Carl Jung said. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but how can you accept a self you've only ever allowed to exist in relation to others? That's the heart of it, isn't it? You've always been someone in orbit, never the center, never the one with gravity. Just a reflection, just resonance, just Gone. Let's stop right here. No metaphors, no mirrors, just this. You changed your career because someone else couldn't cope with your ambition. You stayed in that friendship because they said no one else would understand them. You softened your tone for a partner who couldn't handle your strength. You kept absorbing because it was safer than being seen. But being unseen is not safety, it's slow death. You were not born to become what others needed. You were born to become. The mirror has cracked, not out of rage, but out of mercy, because what you see now is not distortion, not someone else's fear or need or sorrow reflected back. You see you. The face beneath the glass, the shape beneath the shape-shifting. You are not the echo, you are the voice. You are not the mirror, you are the self that forgot it existed. And now you begin again. You've been open for so long you forgot it's supposed to be a choice. You've lived like a field without a fence, soft, fertile, unprotected, and everyone has walked through you, some with tenderness, some with need, some with indifference. They took what they needed. Then they left. And you blamed yourself for being bare. You called it compassion. You called it spiritual. You told yourself love meant being available, no matter the hour, no matter the cost. But the soul is not a public park. It is a garden, and gardens need gates, not to lock people out, but to honor what lives inside. Boundaries are not rejection, they are remembrance of your worth, of your limits, of your rhythm, of your right to choose when to give and when to rest. There was a time when even your rest belonged to others. You'd try to be alone and the phone would buzz, you'd breathe and someone would say, "Can I just vent for a second?" You'd finally feel light and guilt would whisper, "Someone out there still needs you," and so you stayed open, even when you were bleeding. But here's the truth, open wounds are not love. A woman named Layla once told a story. She had spent her life as a therapist, a friend, a daughter, a caretaker. She didn't know how to say no, so she said yes until her body said no for her. One day in the middle of a session, she felt her chest go tight, not a panic attack, not grief, just absence, like her spirit had left the room, even as her mouth kept nodding. That night she drew a circle in chalk on her bedroom floor. She stepped inside. She whispered, "This space is mine." And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel selfish, she felt real. That's what boundaries do. They bring you back. They remind you that you are not responsible for every storm, every wound, every silence someone cannot bear. Judith Orloff teaches empaths to visualize a golden light around the body, not as armor but as filter, not to push people away, but to discern what belongs and what does not. Let's try something. Right now, imagine a gate at the edge of your chest. Feel it gently swing open. Feel it slowly close. This is not shutting down. This is becoming sovereign, because empathy is not a flood. It is a well. It cannot overflow forever. It must be replenished. It must be protected, or it becomes poison. The garden metaphor isn't soft. It's sacred. You tend it. You prune it. You feed it. You don't let strangers walk through it with muddy boots and good intentions, and you don't need a reason to say no. You don't owe an explanation for not wanting to carry someone else's grief. You're allowed to say, "I love you, but I can't hold this right now." You're allowed to say, "This conversation drains me." You're allowed to say, "My silence is not rejection, it's recovery." And when you do, the world doesn't end. It gets clearer, and so do you. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And yes, this will hurt. It will hurt to watch some people leave. It will hurt to realize how much of your kindness was fear. It will hurt to let go of the identity you built on self-sacrifice. But on the other side of that pain is the garden, alive, untrampled, blooming again. You are no longer the sponge, you are the soil, and you are ready to plant something new. You are not here to absorb the world. You are here to transmute it. That ache you carry, the one you thought made you weak, is not the burden. It's the ignition. It's the spark of your sacred fire, waiting for you to stop pouring water on it in the name of being good. You are not a sponge, you are a flame, not the kind that burns everything to the ground, the kind that warms, the kind that forges, the kind that turns what was once unbearable into something holy. Carl Jung wrote of the wounded healer, the one who becomes capable of healing others, not because they avoided suffering, but because they learned to sit inside their wound without being consumed by it. You've been sitting in that place for a long time, but you've been doing it backwards. You've been trying to heal by absorbing more pain, by carrying more weight, by proving your value through how much you can endure in silence. And now your soul is done. It's not giving up, it's catching fire, because somewhere inside you finally realize empathy without discernment is erosion. It's not love, it's self-loss, and you can't keep bleeding into other people's lives just to feel worthy of your own. This is where the shift begins. Daniel used to write poems in his parked car long after work, slumped behind the wheel. The words poured out like wounds, but none of them were his. They were echoes of clients, friends, family. He'd absorbed them all, thinking it made him strong, until one night his hand stopped moving, his pen hovered, and he wrote a different line. This is mine. It didn't change the world, but it changed him, because now he knew the difference. That's where the fire starts, not in resistance, in recognition. You can still feel everything, but you no longer need to keep it. You can still care, but you no longer need to collapse. Francis Weller wrote, "Grief and love are sisters, woven together from the beginning. But even sisters need space. Even love needs form. You've wept for others for so long. You forgot what it means to cry for yourself. You've collapsed in bathrooms, at weddings, behind the wheel, after someone said thank you for always being there, and no one ever saw the cost. But that's over now, because you're learning to choose what enters. You're learning that not everything that aches deserves a place in your bones. You're learning that being open doesn't mean being empty. This is the flame taking shape, not to burn away who you are, but to reveal it. Not to destroy, but to purify. Not to numb, but to feel cleanly. Empathy isn't martyrdom. Empathy is alchemy. And the only way to practice it well is to tend the fire. To return to the self, not in selfishness, but in sovereignty, to stop being the sponge that soaks everything in, to become the fire that holds it all, briefly, brightly, then lets it go. You are not here to suffer well. You are here to become someone who can feel deeply without disappearing, and in that remembering, your empathy becomes sacred, your fire becomes home, and you become whole. And there comes a moment in every return where the door is open, and you see that it was never locked. You just didn't know you were allowed to leave. You thought that to be a good person meant staying in the pain, staying in the silence, staying in the role of the one who holds, absorbs, listens, gives. You thought walking away from other people's chaos meant abandoning them. But now you understand. It wasn't abandonment, it was reclamation. Because every time you said yes, when your soul whispered no, you weren't serving them, you were betraying you. Every time you took in someone's pain without asking if it was yours to hold, you were putting down your own joy to pick up something that was never meant to stay, and now you're done. You don't owe the world your suffering. You don't have to keep proving your love by disappearing into someone else's. You've seen what happens when you give until you vanish. And now something ancient inside you has stirred, a deeper knowing that your softness is not weakness, that your tenderness was never meant to be currency, that your empathy is sacred, but it was never meant to become your cage. This is where the soul begins to fly. Not by force, not by escape, but by remembering what was always yours. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you are doesn't require permission. It requires presence, a presence that doesn't flinch when others are hurting, but doesn't collapse either. A presence that can stand with someone in the dark without blowing out your own light to make them more comfortable. You were not born to vanish. You were not born to be everyone's emotional safe house while your own heart crumbles behind locked doors. You were born to feel, yes, but not to drown. You were born to give, Yes, but not to bleed endlessly. You were born to love, but only if love includes you too, and now you're learning to fly, not away from the world, but back to yourself. You're learning to say, this is where I begin, to say, this feeling is mine and that one is not, to say, I can be with your sorrow without carrying it inside my chest. That's not cold, that's clarity. You are no longer the empath who disappears to keep the peace. You are the one who stands inside your soul and says, I deserve to exist even when others are in pain. The cage is gone. Not because it was broken, but because you no longer need it to prove that you care. You care more now than ever, but it's clean, it's sovereign, it's luminous. You are Avalokite Svara with 1,000 arms, but only when you learned that none of them had to hold everything at once. You are Chiron, the wounded healer, but now you tend to your own wound, not just everyone else's. You are the garden and the flame, the mirror reclaimed, the sponge turned to spring, the soul that never truly vanished, only waited. And now, if these words met you where you've never been met before, let yourself say something back, not for likes, not for algorithm, but for the others like you, the ones still holding too much, still carrying what was never theirs. Leave a comment, a sentence, a truth, a breath. Let this be a place where empaths find each other, not in pain, but in return. And if someone you love is carrying too much in silence, share this. Not to fix them, but to remind them they can finally put it down, because they were never meant to disappear, and neither were you.